to find out why this is happening. They gave us an answer finally last week. We did implement that, but evidently it's not working. It's the poetic refrain in our lives. I mean, it happens every week, basically. But when we got cut off, we were congratulating the winners of the Publishing Next Awards, and specifically focusing on the different, writers and illustrators who won the children's awards. We did, send a shout out to Rohan Chakravarti for runners up in the Illustrator of the Year category, and to Vishnu M. Nair, who was the winner, in the Illustrator of the Year category. Delighted to say that Funky Rainbow's Greystroke, or Sham Madhavan Sharada, was one of the jury members in this category. So a big shout out to you as well, Sham, for picking these wonderfully talented illustrators. Our next shout out goes to the runners up in the Children's Book of the Year 0 to 8 years category, and this one is to Tanushree Singh, Richa Jha, and the team at Penguin India, particularly Sohini Mitra, for their wonderful book, Darkless. It's a book that has absolutely flown off Funky Rainbow's shelves so many times for its sensitive portrayal of a child in a difficult situation, a child, going through a certain kind of emotional trauma. We're delighted that this one, it won in the runners-up. Won the runners-up at the Publishing Next Awards in the Children's Book 0 to 8 years category. The book that won the prize in the 0 to 8 years category, Children's Book of the Year, is that delightful wordless picture book by Kanato Jimo, written and illustrated by Kanato Jimo, called Snip. What a lovely, charming picture book, and such a wonderful addition to our shelves. In the 8+ years category, that is, Children's Book of the Year in the 8+ years category, the runners-up went to dear friend Richa Jha's magnificent book, The Middle, written by Richa Jha and illustrated by Eva Sanchez Gomez. What a wonderful book about the power of words, the power of creativity, and so apt for our BUZZAAR, which is all about poetry books, all about exploring your creativity through the power of words. The book that won the Children's Book of the Year in the 8+ years category, also to someone who runs a fabulous independent bookstore in Gurgaon, Ritu Vaishnav, for her fantastic book, Inside a Dark Box, written by Ritu Vaishnav and illustrated by Rujuta Thakur Desai. A wonderful exploration and a very sensitive exploration of depression and what it feels like, what life can feel like when someone is depressed. Really a big shout out. Delighted that someone who runs an indie bookstore, Cool School at Gurgaon, has won this prestigious award. So once again, from all of us at Team Funky Rainbow, a big round of applause to all the winners of the Publishing Next Awards. It's equally delightful to say that someone who runs an independent bookstore in Goa, the Dog Years Bookshop, Leonard Fernandez, and his wife have set up these wonderful awards which have celebrated 10 years as of this year. Much power to indie bookstores and to creators of children's books everywhere. I have to, of course, say that this week's also seen, the loss of someone who is an author that I read considerably growing up, Beverly Cleary and her Ramona Quimby books. I don't know how many of you have read Ramona Quimby, but if you haven't, She is just a superb character to meet in Beverly Cleary's books. Rest in peace. She was 104. Fantastic collection of books, and what a wonderful legacy to leave behind for the children of the world. For parents and teachers and librarians who are watching, do check out the Ramona Quimby books. They are delightful and they work for children, 8+ year olds or 9+ year olds, depending on the children's reading levels. We also lost a very, very eminent editor and journalist, Anil Dharkar, who used to edit the Midday magazine. Joanne saying, I love the Ramona series. What's not to love about Ramona and her sister? I do still remember spending so many summers chuckling over their misadventures and adventures, and something so charming about Beverly Cleary's writing style. Really, these are books that your children, I mean, they're timeless books. So, absolutely, even children of this generation will enjoy it thoroughly. Like I said, we also lost a very eminent editor and journalist, Anil Dharkar, and, the Mumbai newspaper Midday really owes a lot of its, literary merit to Anil Dharkar's work. Rest in peace to one of our most eminent editors and journalists. So, of course, with those announcements, we get started with our recommendations at the Poetry Bazaar. We celebrated, many of you know that we celebrated World Poetry Day on 21st March. So this is what UNESCO, has put out on the occasion of World Poetry Day. It says, held every year on 21st March, World Poetry Day celebrates one of humanity's most treasured forms of cultural and linguistic expression and identity. Practiced throughout history, in every culture and on every continent, poetry speaks to our common humanity and our shared values, transforming the simplest of poems into a powerful catalyst for dialogue and peace. How relevant, how valid in these troubled times. UNESCO first adopted 21st March as World Poetry Day during its 30th General Conference in Paris in 1999, with the aim of supporting linguistic diversity through poetic expression and increasing the opportunity for endangered languages to be heard. World Poetry Day is the occasion to honor poets, uh, revive oral traditions of poetry recitals, promote the reading, writing, and teaching of poetry, foster the convergence between poetry and other arts such as theater, dance, music, and painting, and raise the visibility of poetry in the media. Glad that Funky Rainbow is able to do our small bit for World Poetry Day. And as Muttama reminded us yesterday, it's also World Theatre Day. What a beautiful convergence of so many fantastic artistic forms of expression. We are indeed lucky that we have books for children in all these, artistic traditions and literary traditions. With that, I'll get started with our poetry recommendations. A warm welcome again to everyone who's watching us on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. It's such a pleasure to see so many of you here this morning. For our friends on Instagram, we always have a guest interview, at the bazaar. And when we do the guest interview, we can't stream this program on Instagram. So we urge you to move to Facebook or to YouTube if you can, to watch our guest interviews. Our YouTube channels have the same name, Funky Rainbow, both on Facebook and on Instagram. Of course, with this, we get on with our first recommendation, a big favorite of many young readers, Dum Dum Dho, which is a compilation of lovely poems from different states of India, rhymes and rhythms from different parts of India, all translated into English. You can see this gorgeous book, which we recommend for 3+ year olds, which is actually a collection of the favorite people's favorite poems from one of Tulika's very, very well known anthologies of poetry called Olugutti Tolugutti. And this one really has rhythms and rhymes for our youngest readers, offering you a colorful kaleidoscope from well known writers who've written in English as well as in the different Indian languages. It's really, the book has been illustrated by Anjora Norona, and, touching on things like chapatis, dosas, squirrels, hathis, about brushing your teeth, really so many, many familiar situations, familiar sounds, and familiar cadences, for Indian children. This lovely collection, we would recommend it if you're reading it as a parent or a teacher. We would recommend it for the youngest of readers. If children should read it on their own, perhaps 3+ year olds, priced at 345 rupees and published by Tulika. Like I've always said in every one of our bazaars, we have several books on the themes that we pick. We can choose about 15-20 of them to talk to you about, but please do visit our website www.funkyrainbow.com. Click on the tab that says Book Bazaar. You'll have a drop down menu, and the first drop down menu will the first item on the drop down menu will be poetry. There are several books besides the ones that we recommend that are up there, all available at discounted prices of 10%. We have a voucher code, which you will see right on top of our website. Please apply that when you're checking out and soak in the wonderful poetry books that we have put out for you. Our next book of poetry is a lovely little gem from an indie publishing house called T4 Tales. And this one has rhyme even in its title, because the title of the book is Chuglu Buglu. I mean, look at the way the words just roll off the tongue. This one, written and illustrated by Alankrita Amaya, the story of who Chuglu Buglu can really be. Kaun hai ye Chuglu Buglu? And of course, you can see. And of course, you can see. The screen just faded off my computer. I'm really sorry. You can see that Chuglu Buglu is, so charmingly illustrated, written and illustrated by Alankrita Amaya. The book, the story in Hindi, but also transliterated for those of you who can't read Hindi. The Hindi text is also written in English. Of course, in the tradition of good pop-up books and flap books, there are wonderful things that you can pull and push to find out. Kaun hai ye Chuglu Buglu? Who is Chuglu Buglu? Is he from outer space? Is he a bird? Is he a snail? If you want to find out who Chuglu Buglu really is, you need to read this charming book in rhyme, and you can see so many little things to pull and push in this interactive book that make it an absolute delight for the youngest of readers. And like I said, it's done in rhyme, because the first line is Kaun hai ye Chuglu Buglu, aankhein jaise koi ullu. Of course, aankhein jaise koi ullu. Sunila Kulkarni Gupte, such a warm welcome to you, Sunila. Hello, Funky Rainbow. Gotten late, but here just now. You're here right on time. We just began with the poetry recommendations. We were congratulating the winners of the Publishing Next Awards before we started the poetry recommendations. This one published by T4 Tales, priced at 499 rupees, meant for our youngest readers. Our next recommendation this morning, and perhaps I'm not sure, many of you may have seen this really wonderful book by the Booker Prize winning author Shihan Karunatilake. He won the Booker a couple of years ago for a book on cricket called Chinaman. And here he is with an excellent book for the youngest of readers called Please Don't Put That in Your Mouth, written by Shihan Karunatilake and illustrated by Lalit Karunatilake. A wonderful little book for our youngest readers about babies, about a baby Baba who wants to put everything he sees into his mouth, whether it's the doll, the keys, a fork, a shoe, and even a pink balloon. Please don't put that in your mouth is funny and rhyming. It's a funny and rhyming book about babies and all kinds of mischief that they get up to. So baby Baba's mostly good. Baby Baba likes his food. He doesn't scream, he will not shout, but he just puts bad things in his mouth. I'm not sure whether these things are good or bad, really, but it's a charming, funny book about babies and the wonderful mischief that they get up to in rhyme, written by a Booker Prize winning author, Shihan Karunatilake. This one, published by Speaking Tiger, is priced at 250 rupees. Our next book is Muttama saying, "This is such a cute one. I chuckled and laughed right through reading it, just like my own babies and puppies." Of course, but of course, really, Muttama, I'm wondering what could have been the various things that your babies and puppies put into their mouth. My assumption is that's going to be many, many books for sure, really. Our next recommendation this morning, the ever popular Roald Dahl, with a lovely edition of his brilliant brilliant poem about mums called My Mum is Magnificent. And of course, this one is illustrated by Dahl's longtime collaborator, Quentin Blake, whose illustrations simply bring the quirkiness of Dahl's writing alive. You know what it is? It's really like a fizz-whizzing celebration of the kindest, bravest, most magnificent mums in the world. And I know many, many of those mums out there watching us. Divya Menon, I'm wondering whether it's the mum or the child who's joined us saying, "Okay, it's Avyukt here. Well, Avyukt, an excellent book for your mom." You're saying, "Good morning. Sorry, I joined late today as my mom had disappeared." This is Avyukt here. That's a magnificent mum, if ever there's one. We love the mums of the disappearing kind, really. But this fantastic poem in a board book format by Roald Dahl and illustrated by Quentin Blake, My Mum is Magnificent, a superhuman being, the kindest, boldest, bravest mum the world has ever seen. Dahl, of course, at his quirky best and, with tons of lovely words that has your tongue rolling and swirling while you read his poem. David Williams from Australia, good morning. How lovely to see you. You say, "It thrills me to see this because I spoke to another writer recently expressing my intent to write a children's book in rhyme, and she screwed up her nose and told me modern kids won't find that cool." Oh yeah, I see that Funky Rainbow begs to differ. Yes, never listen to anybody is the moral of the story. Read them poems and write them for sure, David. This one published by Penguin Random House, priced at 399 rupees. Our next recommendation, two lovely, these are books for the youngest of readers, and you can see, rhyme books, both from Indian publishers and Western publishers, a larger amount from Indian publishers at Funky Rainbow always. I can see Padma Baliga saying, "Good morning, FR. So happy for the session on poetry books. But of course, a teacher of literature has to love a bazaar on poetry books." I'm sure there are several that you can recommend for us as well, Padma Baliga. We're just delighted you've joined us this morning. Our next recommendation, two lovely little board books from Little Latitude, part of their excellent Veer and Anahi series. This one, While I'm Away, and the other one, While I'm Sick. both written by Christy Olson Kennedy and illustrated by the spectacular Prashant Miranda. What are these stories about? One, they are bonds between siblings, Anahi and Veer. You may have met them in a couple of other Little Latitude books. But while I'm away, all about Anahi eager for her first day of school and Veer anticipating the fun and freedom while his big sister is away, and the fun that he can have in her room while she is away. This one has you chuckling, light verse, delightful illustrations, bringing out the story of a first day at school. I'm just going to read you one verse. My first day of school, and while I'm away, do not touch my things and make sure to stay out of my room and away from my toys while I spend the day with big girls and boys. It's a lovely, charming little picture book about Anahi's first day at school and what Veer does consequently. Of course, siblings are siblings and they may fight, but they're also there for each other when somebody falls ill. And while Anahi and Veer are absolutely excited about an outing that they have to set off on, you know what, they can't make it because Veer falls ill. What happens? Such a lovely story of caring and sharing in rhyme again, telling the story of how Anahi looks after Veer when everybody else has gone off on the outing. Again, illustrated by Prashant Miranda. Absolutely lovely books for our youngest readers. Both published by Little Latitude, both books, both priced at 375 rupees. Our next book is a simple, lovely little one from Tulika called What Makes Me Me, written by Purva Agarwal and illustrated by Maithili Joshi. Richa Jha, I can see you there. Big, big congratulations. Hugs to all you FR rock stars. Just a quick peep in for now. We'll sit through everything a little later this evening. You have every reason to take a couple of days off and celebrate the multiple victories at Publishing Next, Richa. We are so delighted for you as a writer, as a creator, and above all, as an independent publisher. Big, big shout out, folks, to Richa Jha, Pickle Yolk Books, The Middle and Darklist, for which she won awards at Publishing Next yesterday. To come back to our recommendation, What Makes Me Me, just the lovely theme of the book makes it an absolute pick me up. You've got to know that each one of us is unique in every way. We can do things exactly the way we want to. We can understand things exactly the way we want to. Richaja sending out a big thank you, and Joanne Saldana saying, I love this book. What a wonderful way for children to explore their identity. Joanne Saldana also sending out a big shout out to Richa. Yes, a fantastic book to explore identity, also done in rhyme. And you can see charming illustrations that really bring this rhyme alive and really telling you, who's me, who's we, and how to keep your identity, because as me, you are unique and you are special. So one verse here: when I'm at the park and try to climb a tree, my mama tells me I'm like a chimpanzee. But I can walk straight and I have no tail, he, and I do look like others in my family. You can see, that there's that much, there is rhyme on every page of this lovely little book that helps children of all ages explore their identity. We'd recommend this for 3+ year olds, priced at 165 rupees and published by Tulika. So many shout outs going to you, Richa Jha. Padma Baliga saying, absolutely awesome, Richa. We couldn't agree more. Absolutely awesome indeed. Our next set of recommendations are by perhaps the person, the author whom we consider India's best poet for children. Anushka Ravishankar. Richa Jha's blushing. Hooray! We've got to see some pictures. Send them to us immediately, Richa, and we'll put them up on our bazaar where we see you blushing with pink cheeks. But like I said, we are, recommending books of one poet whose books we absolutely love at Funky Rainbow. Someone with a quirky sense of humor, such a fantastic sense of rhyme, and, with the ability to write nonsense verse so effortlessly, and all other kinds of free verse as well. Her books are a must read on every child's shelf, and it doesn't matter age, no bar at all. We're picking a couple of our favorites of Anushka's. She's got so many books of rhyme, but here are a couple that we utterly love. This one called To Market, written by Anushka and illustrated by Emmanuel Scanziani, is a lovely book. It's a bouncy modern day nursery rhyme about a little girl who sets off to the market with just a little money in her pocket and no idea what to buy. What a delightful quandary to have, really. And of course, children being children, her imagination romps through the magical Indian market. And of course, you can see, Anushka's quirky rhyme. I'm going to the market with some money in my pocket. My mother's given me a lot of change to spend it anywhere for anything I care for, something funny, nice, or even strange. Really, what a beautiful introduction to the market in quirky rhyme. These rhythmic verses and the illustrations bringing alive the exuberance of an Indian market so wonderfully. This one published by Tara, priced at 200 rupees. Like I said, poetry means age no bar. Read it to the youngest of readers, read it to the oldest of readers. Whatever it is, soak in it and enjoy it. This one, like I said, published by Tara, priced at 200 rupees. And I also love the fact that it opens out like this. Another one of Anushka's books, one of my personal favorites, all-time favorites, is Catch That Crocodile, written by Anushka and illustrated by Pulak Bishwas. Such a delightful story about Falguni fruit seller who finds a crocodile in a ditch. What happens when Falguni fruit seller finds the crocodile in the ditch? And you can see these stunning, two-color illustrations of, in black and just one other color, in this case being green, by Pulak Biswas, just bringing alive Anushka's wonderful, glorious poem alive beautifully. So Falguni fruit seller sells fresh fruits. Banana, guava, mango, she hoots. Come and buy a fresh papaya, as you can see, and the typesetting just so wonderful that really kids will look at these pages over and over and over again. But what happens to Falguni fruit seller? Well, what, how, why, which? There's a crocodile in a ditch. Oh my God. What happens to the fruit? What happens to Falguni fruit seller? What happens to the crocodile? And Muttama reminding me that Greystrokes hero Pulak Biswas, indeed Greystrokes hero, and my God, what a hero to have, really. We don't see such beautiful illustrations in children's books so often. This one, an absolute pleasure, both in the way the rhyming verse works and the way the typography is done in the book, and with Pulak Biswas's illustrations. Again, published by Tara and priced at 250 rupees. Our third recommendation of, another favorite Anushka Ravishankar book, Excuses, written by her and illustrated by Gabriel Manglu. What a lovely book for every child who wants to make excuses. And I mean, who sets out with the most noble intentions, but every intention has an uncanny knack of going wrong. So this is about a little boy called Neil who really has very good intentions to do absolutely the right thing, but every intention of his goes absolutely wrong. So this is how the book opens, and you can again see the sheer beauty and the sheer humor in Anushka's verse. On Monday, Neil decided he'd be in time for school. On Tuesday, he decided he'd obey every rule. On Wednesday, he decided to be a helpful son. On Thursday, he decided to get all his homework done. On Friday, he decided to be sociable and good. On Saturday, he decided to do everything he should. On Sunday, he decided that he would mend his ways. Then suddenly he realized that he'd run out of days. Oh my God. What happens? What happens to every intention that he has set out for the days of the week? And you can see this lovely, collage style illustration by, Gabriel Mangalu, who's an artist from the Reunion Islands, bringing alive the poetry of India's best loved children's poet. It's such a delight, this book. You should have it. You should read it. Adults, children, everyone, definitely a must have on your bookshelves. Published again by Tara and priced at 375 rupees. Our next book is a lovely little one from Kamla Bhasin, feminist writer Kamla Bhasin, and her charming, whimsical, book, Malu Bhalu, written by Kamla Bhasin and illustrated by Bindya Thapar, translated from the Hindi from Hindi by Sandhya Rao, is a lovely, lovely story about a polar bear. What a great rhyme it has as well. High up in the icy lair lived a little polar bear. Snow White, Snow Bright was her mane. Malu Bhalu was her name. Home was with her parents dear, for Malu was of tender years. With seagull friends, she had great fun under the shining North Pole sun. It's a lovely book. It has Kamla Bhasin's concerns that absolutely make their way into this charming story, and written in nice rhythmic rhyme, translated marvelously by Sandhya Rao. I mean, all about equal opportunity, freedom, equal opportunity for girls and boys, and about equality and freedom, but tucked away in a nice little rhyme. We'd recommend this for 4+ year olds, and this book is priced at 125 rupees. It's so lovely that our writers do want to introduce children to different kinds of poetry. And our next book, the one that we're recommending, is this lovely little collection of haikus, beautifully illustrated. And look at the beautiful format of this book. This is how it opens out, and haikus are tucked away in every fold that you can see here. My gosh, how lovely is this tactile book of haikus? I can see Visma Vasan, who's joined us. Visma, I know you'd asked us for a couple of recommendations. I'm sorry, we've been, neck deep in work. We'll make recommendations for you once our bazaar is done today and send them to you this afternoon for sure. But this one is indeed a wow book, written by Kala Ramesh, who's a master of haiku herself, and illustrated by Surabhi Singh. This gorgeous book by Katha, introducing, and of course it comes with an accompanying activity book for young haiku lovers. You can see Joanne Saldana saying, "Oh, gorgeous, it really is, Joanne." I mean, it's lovely the way it folds out, folds open and folds out. It's and introducing children to this simple, lovely poetry form called the haiku, with a little, activity book that's a perfect resource either for parents or for teachers or for older siblings to trigger a child's imagination. This one, published by Katha, is priced at 199 rupees. Our next clutch of recommendations, and I'm going to run through a couple of them, before we bring on our guest of the day. And the next one is also a favorite, Indian poet, Sampurna Chatterjee. We have many of her lovely books in her collection today, but one of the books that is meant for younger readers, a picture book that we want to introduce to you, is called "What Did the Monster Child Eat Today?" Written by Sampurna Chatterjee and illustrated by Vibha Surya. Sampurna so effortlessly uses, "Oh, I can see Visma is my mother's name. I am Ananya and I'm looking forward to getting your recommendations. How delighted we are, Ananya, that you've joined us at the bazaar. It thrills us no end when young people join us and listen to us talking on and on about books." Really, a big hug going out to you for watching us at the bazaar today. This one, like I said, Sampurna Chatterjee's "What Did the Monster Child Eat Today?" How wonderfully, Sampurna uses hyperbole, the exaggerated form of poetry, to tell the story of what the monster child ate today. And here's what, the blurb reads like. It says, my breakfast was revolting. It was simply divine. My lunch was repulsive. I liked it just fine. My dinner was ghastly. It was pure gourmet. You'll never believe the things that I ate today. Really, such a lovely way to introduce hyperbole to the youngest of readers. Avyukt saying, "Auntie, in my English class, we learn about different styles of poems and we have to explore different ones. I will tell my friends about all these books." A big, giant hug coming out to you, Avyukt. From all of us at Funky Rainbow, you are the best brand ambassadors. You and young people like you are the best brand ambassadors we can ever have. We would love to, get a rhyme from all you young people who are watching. Write it in any form of, poetry that you would like to write it in, and send it to us, email it to us at funkyrainbowmail@gmail.com. We would be delighted to read your creative poems. So this one, of course, quirkily also illustrated by, Vibha Surya, having lots of fold-out pages. You can see that in a couple, and it does work for absolutely the youngest of readers. There are pages in between that open out like this, making, book. It's definitely a poem that will leave you shuddering at some of the things that the monster child eats, but also chuckling at what the monster child is eating today. Published by Kharadi Tales, priced at 350 rupees. This excellent poem book by Sampurna Chatterjee. Our next recommendation, also from the house of Kharadi, Padma Baliga saying, "Sampurna Chatterjee has another lovely poetry book for older children. It's coming up for sure. 2 more of hers coming up, one of which we discovered only a month ago and have been enjoying so much that I can't wait to recommend it to all of you. It is coming up shortly in the bazaar." Another one from Kharadi, written by Shobha Vishwanath herself, the founder of Kharadi Tales, and illustrated by Kalpio S. Fox, called "A Tangle of Brungles." Vijay Lakshmi Nagraj saying, "Hello, Team FR. Good to see you. Lovely theme, poetry. I can well imagine being poetry, a theme that's dear to your heart." What is "A Tangle of Brungles" all about? Well, it's an old witch who wishes to marry the dashing Brungle. In order to summon him, she and her coven of witches stir up the great Brungle stew. And what happens? There is a parliament of owls, a cloud of bats, a quiver of cobras. These are just a few things that they need to toss into the terrible broth. But does the Brungle make an appearance? What a delightful way to introduce collective nouns to young readers through charming verse, a verse that brings the witch's world to life. I think I will marry, cried the witch with a wart. Let summon Brungle, the king of my heart. He is so bad, so wickedly vile. I love his grotesque and dastardly style. To bring Brungle here, a broth we must brew. Go find the black book for the great Brungle stew. Really, tell me which child won't enjoy these rhymes and rhythms while figuring out so many collective nouns that are just tucked away in the verses. This one again published by Karadi, priced at 399 rupees. Two quick recommendations before our guest of the day comes in. An eternal favorite, the Nightingale of India, Sarojini Naidu's most popular poem, Palanquin Bearers. Joanne Saldana saying, a tangle of Brungle never fails to get my students laughing uproariously, and they're always surprised by the collective nouns. Indeed, a parliament of crows, really. We only know of a parliament of politicians. I would pretty much prefer a parliament of crows, actually. Such great illustrations and poems, says Ananya, Visma's daughter. This one, written by Sarojini Naidu and illustrated by Indu Hari Kumar, that famous poem by, India's Nightingale. In the palanquin sits the graceful bride, and four able men bear her with pride. In the glorious ways of Indian tradition, sing to the beat of the springy ride. What is charming about this picture book is that this book has been stitched on cloth, so you can actually see the fabric, and of course the illustrations, that cloth has been scanned and put on the pages. You can really see the stitches on every page. What a beautiful way to bring alive a poem that children often have to learn at school. Palanquin Bearers by Sarojini Naidu and illustrated by the most talented Indu Harikumar. This one published by Katha, priced at 195 rupees. We have a clutch of poems by one of our greatest poets, and I'm delighted that we do have his poems in picture book form for our youngest readers. This is none other than Rabindranath Tagore. And I'm going to Muttama saying, Palanquin Bearers is a collector's delight. How crazy we are about it, and hand sell it like eager beavers. Indeed, Muttama, and love the rhyme in your comment. This one, the Champa Flower by Rabindranath Tagore, is such a beautiful poem from his collection, The Crescent Moon. It's all about a little boy who chooses, you get a peek into the life of a little boy who turns into a champa flower just for one day and is wondering whether his mother will recognize him. By Tagore, and this book illustrated by Jaikar. What a beautiful, way to illustrate one of Tagore's most beautiful poems for young readers. Sunila Kulkarni saying, imagine we learnt it in my time, plain Palanquin Bearers. I just love the poem indeed. This one, like I said, by Tagore. Another one that we have also from Sangeeta Krishnamurthy saying, love Palanquin Bearers, got it from you guys. Nothing, thrills us more to know that books have gone here, there, everywhere from Funky Rainbow's shelves. Welcome to our bazaar, Sangeeta Krishnamurthy. What a pleasure to have an avid reader like you with us this morning. The next recommendation, also from Tagore, The Friday Fair, written by Tagore and illustrated by that vibrant, fantastic illustrator, Debasmita Das Gupta. It's a timeless Tagore poem, and you can literally swing to the rhyme and rhythm of this book that vividly recreates a Friday fair. You can see the pictures, and these books are really meant for the youngest of readers. So a must have for those of you who want to introduce Tagore to young readers. A third one in this set, again called Clouds and Waves by Tagore, and illustrated again by a favorite illustrator, Sunena Coelho, which is an endearing, poem about a child who refuses, who resists temptations, and what kind of temptations are these? The clouds inviting her to come and play with them. She'd much rather stay in the blissful company of her mother. Written with so much tenderness, so much love, this beautiful poem of Tagore, again put out for the youngest of readers. Ananya saying, I love reading poems. Me too, Ananya. In fact, all of us at Funky Rainbow absolutely do. Sunila saying, I have the maximum number of books from you. The kids look forward to these. We look forward to it too. And a big hug going out to so many of you who have supported us through what has been an incredibly tough year for an independent bookstore. And I'm sure it's the story of independent bookstores all over the country. So really a big shout out to all of you for continuing to support us and keeping us going in every possible way. These three books from Katha, priced at 120 rupees, must have for people who'd like Tagore and want to introduce their children to Tagore. And of course, the book from which many of these poems have been taken, The Crescent Moon, Poems and Stories, by Rabindranath Tagore, introduced by Ruskin Bond. It really brings alive, Crescent Moon brings alive the world of children in Tagore's unique poetic style. And this one, we would recommend it for older readers, 10 years up, but having lots and lots of poems from, in fact, I think all of them from his collection, The Crescent Moon. Playful, innocent, so full of love and life. This collection is truly an endearing classic for young readers. With that, I will introduce our guest of the day. Let me just check if she's in. If Deepa Agarwal has come in. Just a minute before we bring her in, I'm delighted that we have a dear friend, Deepa Agarwal, joining us at the Book Bazaar today. Everyone knows Deepa Agarwal. She's got so many books to her credit. Author, poet, translator. Deepa Agarwal writes both for children and adults and has over 50 books to her credit. A frequent contributor to magazines and journals in India and abroad, she has also edited and compiled several anthologies. And Deepa is joining us today because her book, 100 Great Poems, I don't know where it is. Hang on one second. Give me another copy, please.
On screen.
Okay, 100 Great Poems, her wonderful anthology that she's edited, 100 Great Poems, a great compilation of the best poetry from the West and the East, edited so deftly, compiled so deftly, introducing children to 100 great poems that have been written for them. But the thing is, and Deepa has several books to her credit. I'm sure Sham can run the covers of several of her books, many of which she has edited, many of which she has written, and, straddling the gamut of, writing from picture books to chapter books to books for middle readers, young adults and adults. Really, it's a pleasure to have Deepa Agarwal join us at the Book Bazaar this morning. Welcome, Deepa. I think Sham's just bringing you into the... Good afternoon, Deepa. Pleasure to see you at the bazaar.
Hi. Thanks so much for inviting me. So delighted to be here. And thanks again to the whole wonderful team.
There seems to be some glitch. I can't hear Deepa Agarwal at all.
Oh, okay. Let me try again.
Just hang on a second. Just wondering what that what needs to be done. Sham, you need to look at it. But I can't. I have to hear her respond to queries.
Can you hear me now, Vidya?
Deepa, just hang on a second, Deepa. I'm not able to hear you. Sham's able to hear you. But I need to, get your responses for us to do this conversation. Just give us a second before we, fix this glitch.
Sure, sure. No, no problem.
I'm back. I don't know, for some strange reason I couldn't hear Deepa, but I can see Visma, Ananya saying I can hear her, Avyuk saying I can hear her, Joanne saying we can hear her, and David Williams saying Deepa sounds really clear to me, but of course I can't seem to hear her. Deepa, hi, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Now I've
Yeah,
got to do something to
it's
hear her. Maybe I need to get on some headphones.
I can't hear you now.
Yeah. Or you want to play it out loud there that I can hear it? No, do you want to put it out loud there? We can't. I absolutely can't hear her. So I think you should just put it out loud so we can continue. Okay, Deepa, I'm hearing you off another computer at the moment.
Okay,
Okay, I
okay.
don't know what that glitch is really. Can
I know
everyone hear us clearly
technology
now?
is never perfect.
Okay, so I was just saying that, above everything else that Deepa has written and edited, the reason that we are delighted that she's here with us this morning is because 20 or maybe 22 years ago, when two young people with big dreams in their heads landed up at Delhi to attend a children's publishing workshop, one of the mentors there was Deepa Agarwal. And these two young people with big dreams, and not so young anymore, Sham and me, who had set out to launch a children's magazine called Chatterbox, for whom Deepa became one of our dearest contributors. It was such a pleasure that back then she encouraged us in so many wonderful ways that, people with just no money in their pockets and big dreams decided that we could go ahead and do what we wanted to do, and put out a children's magazine for 5 years. And I know Deepa's excellent stories and poems sort of brought those pages to life across the 5 years that we ran it. So for me, that is the most precious introduction that I could, make to Deepa Agarwal, friend for so many decades right now. Thank you once again, Deepa. We're here doing what we're doing even today only because of all that encouragement you gave us back then.
Thank you, Vidya and Sham and the whole Funky Rainbow team. I just have such lovely memories of the Chatterbox days, and I visited you in Chennai once also, if you recall. Yeah, that was real fun. I really enjoyed writing for Chatterbox.
I know.
And
And we're
yeah,
hoping we
it's
can bring
wonderful that
some.
we are still, connected in so many ways and still in the children's book world. So it's lovely. I just enjoy the book bazaar whenever I can watch it. And once I participated in the quiz and I got a prize. Oh, wonderful.
Absolutely. You
So,
know what? Still the same dreams, very little money in our pockets, but in a space that we all love so very much. Padma Baliga saying, I met Deepa years ago at a children's literature conference in Mangalore. She was so gracious and approachable. What a lovely way to say that, Padma. Indeed, so gracious and so approachable. Sunila Kulkarni saying, Chatterbox, what a fabulous magazine. I
oh
loved it
yeah.
too. And yes, she was such a huge supporter of Chatterbox as well. And she says, sends a big shout out to you, Deepa. But we will start off with our questions. I was telling our audience that your excellent book, 100 Great Poems for Children, was on Funky Rainbow, or has been on Funky Rainbow's bestseller list. And we have absolutely, feel so much pride and pleasure in telling people that we ourselves across the last 4 5 years have sold some 3,000 copies of this book that has just gone away from our
Oh,
shelves into various schools. Yes, a big, big yay, hooray to you for the lovely book. Hooray to us, Muttama, single mindedly championing this book to every school, every librarian, every teacher she meets. And there's very good reason for us to do it, because it compiles poetry so well for our youngest readers. We will, of course, talk about the book, but let me start by asking you a question. But before that, I can see Ramendra Kumar's joined us at the bazaar. Very, very good afternoon to you, Ramin. He's saying Deepa ji is such a wonderful writer, amazingly versatile and hugely talented. Of course, dear friend Subhadra Sen Gupta, all old friends who've supported us forever and ever, saying, so good to see you, Deepa Agarwal. We are the original Chatterbox gang. Wow, my God, I love the sound of that gang. And you can see that the chattering just hasn't stopped, Subhadra, and never will for sure, really. David Williams saying 3,000 copies sold to schools alone. Wow, indeed, that's a big wow. But because it's a poetry bazaar today, I wanted to ask you, Deepa, it's so true that poetry helps us make sense of the world and express our ideas and feelings in a way that everyday language perhaps cannot. Why do you think children take instinctively to poetry?
Vidya, I think it's all about rhythm. Children take instinctively to poetry because they connect with the rhythm viscerally. And as I mentioned in my introduction, it matches the pulse of their heartbeats. And this is something I absolutely believe in. When you're listening to a piece of music with a distinct beat, your feet start tapping on their own. Why is it? Because your body is responding to the rhythm. And actually, the love for poetry uh, can begin with the lullabies that our mothers sing to us.
Right.
And why is it that we have such beautiful, such charming lullabies in all the cultures of the world? Because it's the soothing rhythm of the song, the calm tone that lulls a restless baby to
Mm.
sleep. So that is the connection I feel is important with poetry. Then again, you have those little rhymes that you use to distract little kids, especially babies. Like, for example, Chanda Mama Dur ke Pue Pakayan. Ke. So, and that rhyme exists in different forms in Indian languages. And so, beginning with these little little poems, because that's what they are poems. Children connect with with poetry, and then when you think of a toddler happily reciting a nursery rhyme, what is it again? It's the sound of the words, it's the rhythm
Right.
that you know plays out in their heads or in their hands when they make gestures or in their voices. So then, as they grow older, you notice that children make up their own verses.
Right.
Sometimes it's to mock each other, make fun of a classmate, which can be rather mean, or to even make fun of adults. So that is the secret world of kids. And if you listen to the play songs, you all must be remembering the play songs that we used to chant as kids, whether it is, oranges and lemons or Posham Bhai Bhai Posham Ba. And later on, uh, there are other clapping games which maybe Vidya, you might be familiar with this, because I know my daughters used to chant it. It's a clapping game. Uma Joshi, ye, ye, ye.
Correct.
And a lot of these rhymes, there is no sense in them. There is just the rhythm and the sounds of the words, and the more nonsensical they are, the more they appeal to children. Then also they make up, parodies of filmy songs and anything catchy that they can skip to. They're those skipping songs. I remember that we chanted as children. I am a girl, black guy dressed in blue. These are the actions I can
Miss
do.
Mary Mac.
So
Yeah.
there is something, a deep instinctive response, as you very rightly said.
So, such a lovely response. I'm so glad you narrated some of those poems and like those rhythmic cadences that all of us probably have like favorite childhood memories about, right? I can see Nandini Nair saying hello to you, Deepa, and hello to Team Funky Rainbow. Young
Hi, hi.
Ananya says, I have the book 100 Great Poems for Children. Deepa Auntie writes so well. And
Oh,
Ramendra
thank you,
Kumar
thank you.
saying, Deepaji's prose is like poetry. Her book, Kashmir, Kashmir, is a lovely example. And Padma Baliga,
Oh, thanks so
absolutely
much, Ramesh,
seconding.
for your kind comments.
We will, of course, talk
Thank you,
about,
Padma.
you know, uh, Deepa's book, Kashmir, Kashmir, just a little later. But David Williams, who's watching us from Australia, prompted quickly to write, to share a rhyme from his school days. Boys are strong like King Kong, girls are weak, chuck them in the creek. Send those kids to India, David. We, the girls, will have them chucked into the ditch.
Chuck.
They can be quite a witch, really, right? So you see, everybody remembering their childhood poems. Yet, Deepa, my mother is an English teacher. She's been teaching, English for over 30 years now. And, the very mention of the word poetry often makes children scrunch up their noses and reluctant and they are quite reluctant to read this creative form of expression. Why do you think that happens?
See, it's the way, that poetry is often introduced to them. It's like it's poetry, something heavy and literary, and then they forget that all the fun that they have with the poetry, when I talk about the play songs and the poems that they make up themselves. Now, another thing is the way parents keep up the connection. They may read out nursery rhymes to toddlers, but when children begin to grow up, they stop reading to them. And it's always connected that reading aloud is something for a child who cannot read on their own. But the thing is, reading aloud more and more, it is being recognized that that is the best way to make any connection with any kind of literature, and also as a form of family bonding. Then
Right.
again, if you expect a child to read a poem that is not connected with their lives at all, why would they be interested? You have
Correct.
to uh, present poems that spring out of their own lives, poems that are contemporary. I'm not saying brush all the old classics into the bin, but you have to also have peppy poems, like you notice how some these YouTube poetry performers have become so popular with the youngsters.
Yes.
Why? Because they talk about experiences, about the concerns of young people. And on the other side, I also, they have to understand that poetry is all around them. It's not something that you have to cram to because you have a test coming up.
That's so
Poetry is basically for enjoyment and also to make you think. Sometimes I think the poems that I was exposed to in childhood, how they have stayed with me, and they come to me at difficult moments, little snippets of rhymes, or even something like Kabir Doha, like "Kal kare so
sure,
aaj
sure.
kare so ab." That is something I keep repeating to myself because suppose I'm given to procrastination, so that is something. And I think reading poetry together, it really makes a big difference. And I have such lovely memories of reading, well, not so much to my children actually, but with my grandchildren, especially my eldest granddaughter. What fun we used to have reading out, for example, Shel Silverstein's Giraffe and a Half. And we used to repeat the poems together. And it's one of those poems, in which the words keep constantly repeated. And that is the best kind of poem to read with a child of, say, 6 or 7, someone who's learning to read also. So it's the selection of poems that's very important. And then another thing, I've noticed sometimes I've called to judge uh, poetry writing competitions, and my heart sinks because sometimes kids are given heavy topics like Swachh Bharat. Now, you can imagine immediately what connection they're going to make with poetry. That it has to be something very noble and worthy and, improving. They completely forget that poetry can be about their own lives.
Right.
And they begin to write about abstract things like compassion when they should be writing poems that demonstrate compassion, because poetry again is also about showing rather than telling. So
Right.
I think the way our approach towards poetry for children is sadly flawed, and we need to think about it.
So,
And
so,
also
sorry.
one very important thing, that we have to stay in touch with poetry in our mother tongues, because those are the poems that will resonate with us through life. And that is sadly gone missing in our daily lives, more than in my childhood when I was always connected with the mother tongue, you know,
Ah,
reading or reciting poems in Hindi. I mean, okay, here now the poems are just there in the Hindi reader and not part of somebody's daily life. So I
how
think that's what we need to
how
rethink the way we introduce poetry.
how well you framed that, Deepa. How well you've brought in like so many relevant points that we need to keep in mind to ensure that children don't lose interest in poetry. Seriously, if I had to write a poem on Swachh Bharat, I mean, I would just give up on things as well. Really, I can see Divya Menon saying good afternoon. I quickly dropped in to hear Deepa ma'am. So wonderful to hear her. Agree with her about how poetry is introduced to kids. Poetry in school is generally left for mugging up, which actually kills the whole underlying beauty in it, unless you have a fun English
Absolutely.
teacher or parent to bring the essence out. Poetry is about showing, not telling, says David Williams as well, and many people agreeing with what you said, Deepa. I want to talk specifically about your excellent book, 100 Great Poems for Children, which brings together a range of Indian and Western poets, as well as old and contemporary ones. What did it take to compile an anthology? How on earth did you choose the 100 poems that went into the book?
Well, I must say it was great fun to compile this anthology. And I must send out a big thanks to my editor, Sudeshna Shom Ghosh, who
Yes.
commissioned this collection. Because, I realized it gave me an opportunity to recall all the poems that I had loved, not only in my childhood, but throughout life. And then I did a lot of reading. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the wonderful part because I discovered so many poems that I had not been familiar with earlier. And, my aim was to keep a happy mix of poems, classic and modern,
Mm-hmm.
poems originally written in English, poems from the West, and our own poetry, whether it is originally in English or in translation. So, a lot of enjoyable reading for me. And then unconsciously perhaps, I picked up several themes because, well, good poetry, especially for children, has
Mm-hmm.
to have a deep connection with childhood. And
Right.
you were talking about Tagore's lovely poems that are so, well, steeped in the childhood imagination. So I have several poems about mothers, fathers, grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
Even these are all poems about relationships.
Okay.
There is the scientist. The first poem is Tagore's "Heartwarming," the scientist,
Right.
beautifully translated by Aruna Vasina.
Yes.
And it really, though it's addressed to the mother, it expresses a child's wonder at natural phenomena. So that is one poem I enjoyed including. Then there is another classic, Subhadra Kumari Chauhan's Kadam, the Kadam tree, Kadam ka ped.
Yes.
And she's known for that very militant Jhansi ki Rani, खूब लड़ी मर्दानी, वो तो झांसी वाली रानी थी. But
Right.
Kadam Ka Ped is in such a different mood, and it's such a charming poem of a mother and child relationship. And I just love the playfulness of the poem. Then, of course, there is Vicky Aria's Mother's House. Lovely, beautiful poem. The images it creates. Then, a poem I really enjoyed is Anupa Lal's Views and Woes of a Teenager, which is from a teenager's perspective about his own mother. And what happens when teenagers are made to, stay in lie. And it's a delightful poem. Apart from that, there are several poems about the things children love, about play, about pets, about toys. There are actually two poems about dolls. I don't know how they crept in. One was, it's just happened. And then there are also, um, there's that old favorite, T.S. Eliot's
Oh, yes.
Macavity the Mystery Cat, which is an unforgettable poem for so many of us. You were mentioning how you went to see Cats,
Cats.
the Broadway show. So it's always all the poems that have had a deep connection with me. Then, apart from that, there are many nature poems, and I'll just mention a couple of them because I don't want to take up too much time. There is D.H. Lawrence's The Snake,
Right.
and that is a poem that, it really shows how we react to, natural creatures, and something like a snake, which we think of as poisonous and a danger. Then, in another totally different vein, is Ruskin Bond's absolutely delightful hip hop nature boy,
Yes.
which it shows that nature is not all calm and beautiful. There are other kinds of risks associated with danger. On the other hand, there are also uplifting poems because we know the power of poetry to lift up our spirits, to buck us up, when we are feeling low. So I included poems like Invictus, another
Mhm.
old classic by
Mhm.
W.E. Henley, and then the immortal If by Rudyard Kipling, though, I mean, if has almost become a cliche, but then I said I must have it. And then there is Jerry Pinto's Heartwarming. look. That's really a poem to lift your spirits if you need some kind of a boost. Then we have plenty of humorous poems, and I thoroughly enjoyed selecting those. We have Sukumar Ray, the nonsense rhymes of
Mhm.
Sukumar Ray, beautifully translated by Sampurna Chatterjee.
Yeah.
Then, of course, Edward Lear. Then also Anushka Ravishankar's
Of course.
Samarpreet Sood, which is a hilarious poem. Then there are many poems from the Indian languages, which I must say I sourced from this wonderful collection, the uh, Puffin Book of Nonsense Verse.
Hmm.
And yeah, some it was a little. I had to do some following up of the permissions.
Hmm.
That was the hard task, but
Okay.
the pleasure was in reading and selecting the poems, and sharing them with readers. And there are also spooky poems, how we all love spooks.
I know.
And one by The Ghost by Keki Daruwala, then Spooky by Sampurna Chatterjee, and then that that amazing riddle of a poem by Walter de la Mare, The Listeners. That is such a haunting poem, and it has stayed for me for I read it over and over again. And also, there are poems from unusual points of view, like The Roti's Grudge, another very entertaining poem by Natasha Sharma.
Right.
Roti feels it's too humble compared to the naan and other exotic kinds of bread. So I can go on and on, but we don't have the whole day here. But yeah, for me, putting this together was a trip down memory lane as well as treading new paths. And I'm really happy that it's received this wonderful response, and definitely hats off to your marketing abilities.
There are 100 lovely poems. For those of you who don't have this book, there are 100 lovely poems to be discovered. You can see Deepa is talking about each one of them with so much love, with so much affection, on how she chose and put them into it. It is a book that we absolutely recommend, that all poetry lovers of all ages put on their bookshelves. I can see both Nandini Nair and Muttama, who went to the same school, saying, "We had to do Kadam Ka Paid in school." Subhadra Kumari Chauhan. I remember, Muttama saying, "My God, how lovely, she has used this poem in the book." So you can see, favorite childhood memories, so I can imagine what fun it must have been to put it together when you were compiling the anthology. Sunila saying, "Oh, Snake, I so clearly remember this. It stays with you forever. What wonderful poems you've selected. Thank you, Deepa and Funky Rainbow." I want to ask you, Deepa, we wanted to talk about one or two of your favorite poems, poets, or poetry books. Do you have, I mean, I know you love poetry and you write poetry yourself. Is it possible even to pick one or two favorites from your,
I have, as you said, I have so many favorite poets and poetry collections, and I could go on and on. But let me, uh, I mean, you've already talked about Tagore, The Crescent Moon. I had that collection, presented to me as a child, and it just touched me so much at that age also. But I let me talk about Emily Dickinson here, because
Mhm.
I'm a great admirer of Emily Dickinson's poetry. I feel, the way in with such conciseness and such economy, she expresses such deep, sentiments that just hit you here.
Mhm.
So the poem I have included in this collection, if there's time, can I quickly read it? Hope,
Mhm.
hope is the thing with feathers. I'll just
Right.
read a couple of stanzas. Because this is a poem I absolutely love. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, and yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. So this is such such a deep poem. How hope really keeps you going, and it's just too marvelous for words.
Yeah, I can. I can well imagine why you like that one, Deepa. It is sometimes, the layers of poetry revealing themselves to you as you grow up. You understand something when you're reading it as a child. As you grow older, so many meanings coming into it. Joanne Saldana, who's a wonderful librarian and a great, educator, saying that this book, 100 Great Poems, is an absolute treasure chest. It has got me discovering a whole lot of poetry, something I'm only just learning to appreciate. Ananya saying,
Thank you, Joanne. I'm so happy to hear that this book has resonated with you and reached out to you in a special way.
so of course, since most of our audience, Deepa, they're parents and teachers, what do you think they can do to introduce poetry to children and help them enjoy it?
Okay. Now, earlier I mentioned, about reading poems together,
Mhm.
keeping aside and not making it something obtrusive or must do. It just, doing it casually. And again, I'll stress the selection of the poem. Let's have comic verse. Let's have nonsense verse. I remember older sister, who has really been a mentor to me, a guide to my reading. She came up, gave me this collection of comic verse, and what fun I had! The limericks and strange epitaphs on gravestones and things like that. So they have to find the right poems to read with their children. Then the other thing which somebody mentioned earlier also, that children are made to mug up poems without understanding the meanings. And I think that's absolutely criminal. If a child cannot sense the meanings of the words that they are reciting mindlessly, what is the point of it all? It doesn't help anybody. So poems must come alive for children. And I have this lovely memory. I don't know how old I was, maybe 7 or 8 years old. And we did Goblin Market, Christina Rossetti's Goblin Market in school. And in our school, we had this system. I don't know if it's still followed. The whole class would read the poem out aloud together. We would
Mhm.
really shout it out. But something must have stayed. So I remember I was so fascinated. The poem was so vivid to me that I drew a scene of the Goblin Market, and that is my you know spontaneous response to the poem. So we must evoke such responses from children, and it can also be done by performing poems. You've seen Julia Donaldson's amazing, such wonderful performance she does on her books. So, and in fact, we used to do the Habitat Children's Book Forum earlier, and there, some schools. Once I remember, Jhansi Ki Rani was beautifully performed by a young girl dressed up in the costume of the Jhansi Ki Rani, and then another school, we were celebrating Tagore's anniversary, and they did a skit on Veer Purush. And I
Oh.
could see they were having so much fun, dressed up in those costumes, and there was action, and the poem definitely came alive. In fact, when we launched 100 Great Poems for Children at India International Center, I asked my granddaughter, who was learning Kathak at that time, I said, why don't you ask your teacher to choreograph Kadam Ka Ped, which she did. So you see, there are so many approaches to poetry, except for, apart from that, making them mug a poem up for an elocution competition. And sometimes, it becomes so sing song, and you're wondering, Is the child aware of what she's saying? Because the stresses and the emotions don't come out so well. So that's the thing, that poetry is a living thing. It's not something, not lying in a dry and dusty old book. It lives with us. And then again, of course, make them aware, like, the popular songs, you have the film songs, the advertising jingles, all this is poetry.
Right.
So nothing is to be despised and nothing is to be put up on a pedestal. It has to be at your own level so that you have a warm and comfortable feeling with poetry.
What lovely, lovely advice there, Deepa. Like to keep it connected, to keep it, not to put something up on a pedestal. I know lots of children love to listen to rap music, and there's often, a lot of rhyme in rap music, basically, right? So to let your children believe that poetry is a living, feeling thing that they can enjoy, that they can write, and that they can create as well. My the question that everybody has been asking as well is that you have so many books to your credit. I mean, 50 or over 50 perhaps, straddling the gamut from picture books to chapter books to books for young adults and even adults. I remember reading your Begum, the book Begum, last year and enjoying it so much. How do you write, Deepa, for such diverse audiences? And would you like to tell us how you do that and talk a little bit about your latest book that everybody has loved and enjoyed, Kashmir, Kashmir?
Thanks so much for the question, Vidya. Well, for me, when I'm writing, it's the story that's in my head that takes primary importance. And sometimes there are stories that can only be turned into a picture book. Well, that's not strictly true, but when I'm looking at a story or a story that can be made into a chapter book or another story that is for a slightly older age group. And there's some themes, some ideas that come up that can only be written for adults. And then, though I do a lot of commissioned work also, uh, but the thing is, there's some ideas, some thoughts, some stories that you want to tell. And a lot of my stories are, unanswered questions from my childhood or, you know, remarks that have raised a question in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I create my stories. And it's mostly, I think, for myself. It's for myself to sort something out in my head. I'll just give one small example of the story of mine, Fire, which is actually an incident from my childhood, which left an unanswered question. So I had to write it, because writing is also therapy for me. I want to share my stories with readers, and but also I'm working out different issues through my stories or my nonfiction writing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my recent book, Journey to the Forbidden City, that was a
Mm-hmm.
book I've been wanting to write for years
Okay.
because I had a personal connection with that story. Nen Singh Rawat being related to my grandfather. Not too many people knew about his exploits. So again, it was with Caravan to Tibet. That was similar because
Lovely
it was
book.
family history which I was disconnected with. So I had to rediscover it. This is why I have taken up so many different kinds of themes and topics. I don't know if it would have been more sensible to stick to one kind of genre,
Oh.
but I think there is something I always want to explore something new. I think the only thing I haven't done is science fiction, which I don't think I ever will do because it seems beyond me. But I do, as I said, whatever idea comes to my head, it'll stay maybe for years and years. And some point I'll take it up. And then to the actual writing, I know people ask me, how do you switch, from writing for adults
Mm-hmm.
to writing for children? Yeah, I know sometimes it becomes a bit tricky. Sometimes my editors have to pull me up and say, you know, this could have been expressed better in this way. And usually I am very humble about it because I know the the objective assessment of any piece of writing is very important for a writer. You
Right.
can get so enamored of your own writing that you think, oh, this is perfect, but you need somebody's eye to point out if something is going, not the way it should. And this happens a lot, in short stories. So for adults, they may not be, heavy on plot, which my earlier short stories are for adults or not. But a children's story demands, a proper tying up of loose ends.
Mhm.
And then also you have to keep switching between, you know, the viewpoint of a child, the viewpoint of a teenager, the viewpoint of an adult. Well, I think at this stage of my life, I have lived all those different stages. So I think I just go back to, some forgotten experience and try to recall what it was like. So that's how I do it.
So much, so much humility, so much insight, so much love in everything that you've said, Deepa. It's not easy to have 50, 60 books to your credit, and to say at that stage still that you do listen to your editor, and because they are judging your writing. I mean, it really, we know that there are going to be a lot of books that come out of your stable, and we're going to be eagerly waiting to turn them into bestsellers if we can. And we do want to tell our audience that we have so many books of Deepa Agarwal's and Funky Rainbow's website. Just log into our website, www.funkyrainbow.com, type in the name Deepa Agarwal, and including this wonderful recent collection of stories that she's done called Kashmir, published by Scholastic. It's a beautiful collection that really explores a land that has been, that is caught up in conflicts of all kinds. But to give Deepa the credit of showing hope even in the midst of conflict and despair, it's a collection that we thoroughly enjoyed at Funky Rainbow. Thank you, Deepa, for joining us. It was such a pleasure to have you here
Thank you. Thank you so much.
with us.
Thank you, all of you who are listening. Really appreciated your comments and do always enjoy reading and always derive as much pleasure as all of us who are here. We are all readers and we know it's something special to be a reader. And thank you so much, Vidya, the whole Book team for having me here. It was such a pleasure to be talking about poetry in my books.
Thank you, Deepa.
Okay,
Look forward to many, many more new books from you. It's been such a
thank
pleasure. I
you.
know we'll be chatting like this 20 years later as well. Chatterboxes once, chatterboxes forever, really. Thank you so much, Deepa, for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Bye.
Joanne saying, thank you, Deepa. So much to learn and absorb from you. So nicely said, really, Joanne. So much to learn and absorb from a writer with so many books to her credit. I'm going to, we have tons and tons of recommendations. I know Ananya is saying, I will read all Deepa's books. How delightful that is. Avyuk saying, thank you, ma'am. It was so wonderful listening to you. It is absolutely a pleasure that so many of you have enjoyed this conversation with Deepa. I know we have several books of poetry to recommend still, but I'm going to stick to a couple of more, for you. All of them, the ones that we haven't been able to recommend and the ones that we didn't put into our recommendation list today, all of them up on our website, www.funkyrainbow.com. Click the tab that says Bazaar. There'll be a drop down menu. One of the tabs there will be poetry. Check out all the wonderful books that we have put out for you. And if you would like to read them, do, order them from us. I'm going to recommend a couple of books. Sham, I'm going to skip a couple of recommendations, so you need to see what I'm focusing on. This one is a book that is really, really dear to to me, and it's such a magnificent book. It's called "I Saw a Peacock with a Fiery Tail." It's a well-known folk poem from 17th century England, and it is actually a form of trick verse. Depending on how you read every line, it's either fantastic, as in fantasy filled, or something that makes perfect sense. Tara, of course, has brought out an inspired version of this classic poem, and have they've used art and design to make the language of this poem come alive. You can see that the cover, and I'm just going to quickly show it to you. These excellent die cuts that Tara uses in the production of these books. I mean, you can see. Actually, the pleasure is that with each time that you read through the die cut, reveals something to you. What a great way to use visual art to, bring a poem to life. You can see what happens to that circle on one page, where you can actually see that it highlights the words of the poem, "I saw a peacock." And when you turn the page, of course, that die cut becomes a part of the peacock. Of course, you can, and then when you turn the page and these die cuts, you can see, you can read "with a fiery tail." And what happens when you turn the pages? Look at what happens to those beautiful shapes and cuts. You can see that "I saw a blazing comet." I'm telling you, this book is magnificent in every sense of the word. It does exactly what Deepa wants us to believe: bring poetry alive for readers, young and old, through great playful design, great playful art. It's absolutely a must read book. And I've got to say that it's possibly one of the books that I admire so greatly in our collection, looking at it every now and then and delighting in the way that its meaning comes alive for me. It's truly a book of visual art and poetry, published by Tara, priced at 600 rupees. There's no way I could have not recommended this one at the bazaar. Joanne saying, absolutely magnificent is the word. Magnificent it indeed is. At Muttama's request, because it's also World Theatre Day, going to run through a clutch of books on theater that we have at Funky Rainbow. And I'm just going to quickly run through these because there are a couple of favorite poetry books that I do want to recommend still. This one, a lovely play for young readers with lots of tips on how to adapt it either at home or in the classroom or for stage. The Boy and the Drum, a play for all ages, written by Umesh PN and illustrated by the very talented Rajiv Ipe. You can literally see that, there are stage instructions, there are dialogues, and it's a fun and learning kind of play that children will completely enjoy. We have to recommend Poily Sengupta's Good Heavens, one-act plays for children, perhaps one of the earliest books in the Indian kidlit space, introducing one-act plays that can be performed by children. And Poily, master of the of theater, writing theater both for young children and for adults, has filled this book with 7 thought-provoking and fun plays for young readers. We'd recommend this for 10-plus-year-olds. And you can see, there is information on the author talking about theater, its origins, how you can prepare for a production, step-by-step details on auditions, rehearsals, props. It's such a treasure trove, this book by dear friend and a very, very respected writer and, theater person, Poily Sengupta. This one published by Penguin, priced at 250 rupees. In a similar vein, Plays for Schools, published by Scholastic, again compiling 5, 6 plays, for young adults mostly. We'd say these plays would work, for 12 plus year olds. Plays by Manjula Padmanabhan, Paro Anand, Ujwala Samarth, lovely plays that children can, of course, perform in school. David Williams saying, a Poili Sengupta book, of course, by knows, of course, really a fund of information and such a creative person herself. One of my favorite playwrights in the Indian space, Vijay Tendulkar, many of whose poems I grew up, I mean, many of whose plays I grew up reading as part of my literature course, and many of which influenced me deeply. I'm delighted to present this anthology of 5 plays that Vijay Tendulkar wrote for children. I mean, he's an iconic figure, not just in Maharashtra, but in the theater world all over the country and abroad as well. And these 5 plays, translated by Dr. Ajay Joshi, such, important ones for young people to read and to perform if they'd like to. They are set in, Maharashtra, and but for readers who may be unfamiliar with Marathi language and culture, these plays are extremely accessible. And like Deepa said, we need to introduce our young readers to writing from different Indian languages. This is a must have in any school and home library, published by Scholastic and priced at a mere 95 rupees. Again, another quick collection of plays, from CBT, priced at 55 rupees. 6 plays for young readers, bringing, plays written by Kaveri Nambisan, Swapna Datta, Indira Anantakrishnan, Neelima Sinha, Debashish Majumdar, names that are so familiar to us today, available in an accessible and affordable anthology of plays. All of these books on theater, books of plays meant for readers of all ages to celebrate World Theatre Day. I'm going to make a couple of more quick recommendations on poetry before I get into our new arrivals. And Sham, I'm going to skip a couple of books that we put into the stream. So if you could just find pictures as I'm talking. I can't not talk about the one person whose writing and poetry I so deeply admire, Jerry Pinto. And this one just has you chuckling right through. Tickle Me, Don't Tickle Me, and other poems for magnificent, turbo-loaded, triple-charged children. How many of us know kids like that? Or are all the children we know really, turbo-loaded and triple-charged? It's Jerry Pinto picks on everything, everything that you can see around you. For instance, there's one: why is the hamster such a scamster? What's it with mothers and coconut oil? What happens to children who dig their noses? Why do we need new days of the week? And what on earth is a questoon? With lovely sound poems, rhyming words, rhythmic cadences, Jerry Pinto, opening up laughs aplenty in this fantastic collection called Tickle Me, Don't Tickle Me. For those of you who love poetry, this one is an absolute must. Padma, because you talked about Sampurna Chatterjee, I'm going to show you Johan Saldana saying, such a fun book, really one of those books that has you chuckling right through. You can dip into any of the poems when you're feeling blue in any way, and the blues will be gone in a jiffy for sure. Padma Balika, because we talked about Sampurna Chatterjee, who's also such a wonderful contemporary poet, I'm going to show you 2 of her books, which are such favorites at Funky Rainbow. One that has been a favorite for many years, and, called The Fried Frog and Other Funny, Freaky, Foodie, Feisty Poems. David Williams saying, oh my God, what happens to kids who pick their noses? Now I'm scared. Now you've got to read Jerry Pinto's book to dig into the mystery of what happens to kids who dig their noses. this one with Sampurna Chatterjee, really writing about all kinds of strange, hilarious, serious things, but making them sort of so wacky, so weird, so wonderful. And, Priya Kurian's glorious illustrations complementing the poems so very well. It's such a light-hearted collection. There are some wonderful poems about grandfathers, about ghosts, about word balloons, about just sitting down and wondering about things, holiday poems. Well, holidays coming up for children very, very quickly. And, this is a great anthology by Sampurna to, keep your children very, very happily engaged through summer. This one published by Scholastic, priced at 195 rupees. But Padma, the real discovery was this fantastic anthology, which we've been ordering and ordering and ordering from Scholastic for ages now, but only came to us about 15 days ago. This excellent collection called the Bhaya Bachaya Ka and Other Wild Poems, written by Sampurna and illustrated by Yurig Salisbury, with whom she's collaborated and done other books as well. This one illustrated by Saswata and Sushruta Mukherjee. Such a fantastically put together collection, bringing alive curious creatures of all shapes and sizes that come alive in this collection of nonsense poems that are creepy, that are strange, that are funny, and undoubtedly very, very, very entertaining. You can see there's a poem here, and I love this, typography and the use of these colors, just black and red. It's a collection, like the blurb says, there's a character in the blurb who says, "What nonsense," in this book. Really a wonderful collection by Sampurna Chatterjee that's going to entertain the children, young and old. I want the super looking book. You absolutely need to have it for sure, Padma. Three quick recommendations before we get into new arrivals. This book makes no sense. What a lovely title for the book. Well, indeed, this book makes no sense. Edited by the delightful Michael Heyman and again illustrated by Priya Kurian. And which child can resist such nonsense verse? This book just called you a grouch. It stuck its toe in your ear. It just waved its pants at you. It threw a proto papadam at you. Why you? Why now? Why? Why? Well, to find the answers to such quirky, hilarious, nonsensical questions from, you just have to get into this book that makes no sense. And don't tell me I didn't warn you. You can see, it's an anthology edited by Michael Heyman. So there are poets who've written delightful nonsense verse, including classics like Sukumar Ray and Rabindranath Tagore, Edward Lear, new generation nonsense writers, poets like Anushka Ravishankar, Samit Basu, John Arno Lawson. What a lovely anthology this one is too. Delighted that Scholastic has brought out so many wonderful collections of poems for our young readers, priced at 150 rupees and published by Scholastic. This one we have to recommend because Deepa Agarwal told us about the delightful poems that Julia Donaldson has written. And these are poems to perform. It's a classic collection chosen by the children's laureate, Julia Donaldson. So we've got a whole bunch of poems with a lot of little inputs, bits and bytes on how to perform poetry for an audience. So there's Julia Donaldson herself, there's Michael Rawson, there's Colin West, there's, Pamela Mordechai, there's James Reeves, there's W.H. Auden, R.L. Stevenson. What a lovely book to entertain your children with. And I think they will just take so effortlessly to performing the poems in this book. I mean, right from lending a voice, right from acting out these poems. This is such a fun read, and it's been beautifully illustrated, really, with lovely lino cuts. With lovely lino cuts You can see a great, collection for teachers, parents, children, anybody who loves poetry. And of course, not to leave our young adults out, we have a whole host of books for adults as well. But I will stop with this one called 97 Poems, each one of them just called 1, 2, 3, 4, 35, 36, 37. It's a book really of pictures. This was part of a huge initiative called Terribly Tiny Tales, where people from all over the world contributed terribly tiny tales to a blog, because it was such a huge success. And that book went on to be published by Penguin with Terribly Tiny Tales. And I know young adults, 14 plus year olds, just love that book. They did one of 97 poems. Really fantastic poems, very contemporary, something that young adults will easily identify with. Again, published by Penguin, priced at 250 rupees. There are several recommendations in the Poetry Bazaar that we've left out. There are books in Hindi, which we haven't been able to talk about. So do check our website, www.funkyrainbow.com, and look into the tab that says poetry to find all the books that we haven't been able to recommend today. Very quickly, our new arrivals. Sham, are you going to just quickly play the new arrivals music? So very quickly, brand new on our bookshelf, Manjula Padmanabhan's amazing animal alphabet book. It's so tantalizing just looking at the pages, where there are, witty bats and inky winky crows and hee-haw donkeys. It's an animal rhyme book. And we're so glad that it just came to us, yesterday. That's published by Tulika. There's another one from Tulika, Uncle Nehru, Please Send an Elephant by Devika Karyappa, which came in last week, illustrated by Satvik Gade. We just loved reading this story about India's former Prime Minister Nehru, beloved by children. It's a great book, and you have to find out what this unique elephant diplomacy is all about. Arundhati Nath saying, hi Vidya, nice to see you again. What a pleasure that you're here at our bazaar, Arundhati. Thank you for joining us. Can't go off without recommending this excellent book by Maria Popova of Brain Pickings. Co-written and illustrated by Maria Popova and Ping Zhu, The Snail with the Right Heart. And if I know Maria Popova, and I'm going to read this one over the weekend, this one is going to warm the cockles of the heart of all young readers, I'm sure. Two other quick, ones. We know, how popular the Wimpy Kid books are, but this one is Rowley Jefferson's Awesome, Friendly, Spooky Stories by Jeff Kinney, published by Scholastic. So I'm sure this is laughter and spooks guaranteed. And of course, this beautiful production of George Orwell's Animal Farm, written by Orwell and illustrated by Chris Mould. Such a fantastic, illustrated edition that brings out the humor and darkness of a fable of a fable that's completely timeless. His story of power and greed has never felt more pertinent. I mean, it's for those who want to introduce Animal Farm to readers, let's say 9 plus or 10 plus, this is a fantastic anthology to do it. Joanne Saldana saying that, oh my God, this book, that's Maria Popova's book, I was just blown away. The Snail with the Right Heart was recommended to us by Zai Whitaker. How very wonderful. That's precisely the book that Team Funky Rainbow is going to be reading this weekend. So with that, I mean, David Williams saying, wow, animal farms for adults too. But yes, this beautiful, edition about all animals being equal, but some animals being more equal than others, written by Orwell and illustrated by Chris Mould, really bringing alive a fable that is very, very pertinent to our times, even today. I'm going to quickly run out thank yous, say thank yous to so many people who joined in. We just didn't even have a minute to acknowledge all of you, but we don't want to go away without saying that. I know many of you may have left the show, but still here goes out. Muttama Devaya, Joanne Saldana, Haripriya Batula, Pushpa Pani, Tanushri Singh, Navita Sandhu, Jyoti Narayan, Shweta Prakash, Suchita Ladha Rati, Jagdish Makwana, Shruti Shetty, Vidya Nesarikar, Sunila Kulkarni Gupte, Divya Menon, Avyuktan Ameya Nair, David Williams, Padma Baliga, Subhadra Arvind, Radhika Timbadia. What a pleasure. Thank you for joining us from Champaka. And a big shout out always to independent stores for the wonderful work that you do in keeping reading alive. Richa Jha, Anasuya Mishra, Shobana Joshi, Visma Vasan, and her daughter Ananya, Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj, Ashwangi Bhatt, Sangeeta Krishnamurthy, Dinesh Nambiar, Subhadra Sengupta, dear friend, Ramendra Kumar, Nandini Nair, Shruti Sri Raghunath, Purple Space Library, Life at an Indian Farm, Defense Bakery. Wow, I wonder if there are some goodies, for us from there. Sonali Jain, Shweta Jagannath, Aish, Pranoti, Namita Patel, Wonderleaf Club, Katha Kutuhala, Bhavna Kittur, Nourishing Seedling, CG Salamander, Subhashri, Books Network India, Niyati Sharma, Arundhati Nath, Meetika, Rohan Subramanian, Textile Adventure, Celebrating Life, love that word, Surtal Masti, Tickling Tailbone, Rachana, Square Bag Toys, The Little Red Urko, Anjani Rajagopal, Ranju, and Ashima Kataria. What a pleasure that so many of you have joined us on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. Thank you so much for the wonderful support, and have a great poetic weekend. Dip into some poetry across this Saturday and Sunday and enrich your lives in a way that nothing else can. Our collection is out there. If there are books that have interested you from what we've recommended, do consider picking them up from Funky Rainbow. We'll see you next Saturday with another beautiful bazaar. Till then, stay poetic. Bye-bye.